Hey everybody, I thought I would film today and capture a little of the snow we are getting where I am in case you enjoy the snow and don't have any where you are. So I hope you enjoy the snow even if it is coming to you virtually. But the good news is it's coming to you without the below freezing temperatures we are experiencing here. So I just wanted to share today one of my go-to Bible verses during this past year has been, and I think it's been a go-to for many people, but it is Psalm 34, verse 18. And it says that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And I think whoever you are and wherever you have been and whatever has happened to you this year, your spirit is at least a little dampened, if not completely crushed. And so I think it's important to remember that the Lord is not only with us, but the Lord draws especially near. God draws especially near to us when we are hurting and disheartened and discouraged. I think that is good to remember. And as we go through the next few months, where there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but we have not reached the end of the tunnel, and things we had hoped would happen this year don't look like they're going to happen this year, and it all just has stretched out longer than we thought it would. Let's keep in mind the number of people who are grieving. 400,000 people have lost their lives to COVID this year. And if you give a very, very low estimate and say that for every one of those people, 10 people are grieving that loss, which I think it's probably about 10 times that for most people. But for our purposes here, we'll say for every one of those lives lost, 10 people are grieving. That means 4 million people in our country are grieving the loss of a loved one. And probably 2 times, 3 times, 4 times that number. Even if you haven't lost a person and you aren't mourning the loss of a loved one, if you have lived through the last year, you are mourning the loss of something. You are grieving the loss of a job or even a business that you started yourself. You're mourning the loss of what could have been, what should have been, plans that you had made that completely got demolished by this virus that has taken so much from so many. So everyone right now is grieving something. Everyone is grieving. And so when we are experiencing grief, and you probably know this, grief takes all sorts of forms. Sometimes grief shows up as anger, and sometimes grief shows up as depression. Sometimes grief shows up as forgetfulness and scattered brainedness, which is often hard to detect in my case, but that is one of the ways grief shows up. Grief can show up in our lives in so many ways that we often don't see it as grief. And it shows up in the lives of others in so many ways that we often don't recognize that as grief. When other people are angry or irrational or short-tempered, or just plain mean-spirited, we don't always pause to think that this may be grief rearing its ugly head. And grief shows up in so many unexpected ways and unexpected places. Just then when we think we're over it and we have conquered it, it rises up and hits us upside the head when we least expect it. So I say all of this because I think when we all recognize and realize that we are grieving and that just about everyone we encounter is grieving as well, then we can approach life in a different and more loving and intentional way. First of all, when we ourselves are grieving, one of the things we should do is take radically good care of ourselves. Make sure that we are getting enough rest and eating good things, putting good things into our body, that we are taking the time to breathe, that we are moving towards God instead of away from God. All of the things that we know are good for us, those are things we need to be really intentional about when we are grieving. And in the same way, when we know that others are grieving, we need to help them do the same things. We need to make sure they're eating right. There's a reason that everybody takes food after a funeral. It's not just some tradition that has no root in reason. When someone is grieving, they need to fuel their body. They need to be nourished. And that is one way we can help do that. So in a time of grief, make sure you're taking good care of yourself. Help others to take good care of themselves. And then be gentle with yourself and with others. Like I said, grief crops up in the most unexpected ways at the most unexpected times. And so sometimes we like to believe that we have conquered it, we have overcome it with our faith and our determination and our strong intellect. And often we get disappointed with ourselves when we are still dealing with this grief that we think we should be over. Be gentle with yourselves. Grief does not keep a timeline, and it certainly doesn't keep our timeline. And in that same way, let us be gentle with others, knowing that everyone we encounter right now is most likely grieving something. This doesn't excuse people's actions or get them off the hook with no responsibility for their actions, but it can help us to understand the attitudes of others, and it can certainly change the way we respond to the words and the actions of others. So on this snowy day, at least where I am, please, please, please take radically good care of yourself. Help others to take care of themselves, and be gentle with yourself and with others. And know that the words of the psalmist are true, that the Lord does indeed draw near to those who are hurting and saves those who are crushed in spirit. You are not alone. You are held in more love than you could ever imagine.